And hopefully you're going to be able to have a chance to get out and enjoy the great weather that we have today. Maybe you plan on going out and spending some time with your dog outside. And with that in mind, it is time to check in with a good friend of ours. It is Kim Baer, attorney at law, as we talk about two of our favorite subjects, Kim. We're talking about dogs, but in this case, we're talking about dogs and how if you're a dog owner, seriously, if you're doing something else, stop what you're doing and just settle down for the next 5 minutes or so, because Kim, we have some really important information, don't we?
We do. I think it's important for people who own dogs, no matter what kind of dog it is. I think you need to know exactly what the Iowa law is with regard to dog ownership. And then also, if God forbid you're bitten by a dog, you need to know about your rights.
Okay, let's talk about being bitten or attacked by a dog. We are talking about millions of injuries every year in the U.S., aren't we?
We are. I think the statistic is 4.7 million people are bit by a dog each year in the United States.
Yeah, and under Iowa law, there's some things that hopefully you'll take away from this conversation. Under Iowa law, there is one misconception that just surfaces above all the other ones when it comes to dogs involving a dog that bites somebody.
Yes. I think people in general think that they're entitled to one free bite. And so if their dog has never bitten anyone, and this is the first time their dog has ever bitten someone, that you can't bring a claim. And that simply is not true in the state of Iowa. It's strict liability. So if your dog bites someone, you're going to be liable. I mean, there are some exceptions. Like an example would be if you're trespassing on somebody's property and then the dog, of course, attacks you, there's an exception for something like that. And there are some other exceptions. But for the most part, if your dog bites someone, you're probably going to be liable.
All right, so if somebody, say, is unfortunate to the point where they do get bitten by a dog, do they have to prove that this happened, or what's the burden of proof?
Yeah, so the burden of proof really is that you've been bitten. You don't have to prove that the owner was negligent or reckless, and you don't have to prove that they knew that the dog was mean. This could be, Fido, who is just simply a super dog, and for whatever reason, hauls off and bites somebody. And so you don't have to prove that the owner really knew anything about the dog. All you have to do is just prove that you were bitten by that dog.
All right, does the breed of the dog matter? There's a lot of people that think that comes into play.
It really doesn't with regard to liability. So a dog, if you get bit by a Chihuahua, the owner's liable. If you get bit by, a pit bull, the owner's liable, unless it falls into one of those exceptions. What owners of dogs really need to know is that you need to check the ordinances where you live, because they vary city to city, and you want to know what the licensing requirements are, what the insurance requirements are, what the leash requirements are, because they're very different city to city.
Okay, and the vicious tag is given to some dogs. We have to make sure that we keep that in mind, and that's really important to note too, isn't it?
It is. So, for example, in Des Moines, Iowa, they do have vicious breeds, and they've identified some breeds that they view as vicious. But they also say that if a dog has bitten before, it's going to be treated as a vicious dog.
Oh, okay.
If it's been trained to bite, if it snips, if it's been known to snip. And one of the things that you have to look at, really pay close attention in Des Moines, is what the requirements are. If you have one of these dogs, you're required to have a $100,000 liability policy for the dog to make sure that you're covered up to $100,000. There's fence requirements, there's leash requirements that are special for these dogs.
All right, yeah, important things to keep in mind. Now, what if you have been bitten by a dog? How long do we have to file anything?
Yeah, so in Iowa, the statute of limitations is 2 years. So it's going to be 2 years from the time you were bit. We tell people all the time, make sure you're taking photos. Obviously, you want to call animal control, because initially we want to make sure that we don't have a rabies issue. So we want to make sure you're okay. And then you need to keep track of your medical bills, and you would have a claim for scars, and you also would have a claim for a lot of times people then have trauma around dogs. They're afraid of dogs, and so that also is part of the claim.
Right. We obviously the owner of the dog would be liable. Is there any case where anybody else might be liable?
That's a great question, Lou. Yes, sometimes landlords can be held liable. Sometimes property managers can be held liable. It depends on the situation and what they knew and whether or not there were rules against these types of dogs. So if you've got someone who knows that a dog is vicious or it's running around and they do nothing and they were supposed to do something, you could bring a claim against them as well.
All right. If people have any other questions they might need answered, or maybe they want to have a conversation with you to find out what to do next, what's the best way they can do so?
Sure, you can give us a call at 515-INJURED, or you can give us a call at 515-279-2000 at the Baer Law Office. We're happy to have a chat with you.
All right, Kim, thank you so much for that information. If you're a dog owner, hopefully you took away some very important information here this morning. We appreciate your time, Kim.
Okay, see you later.
All right, see you later.